The stars above Mars were silent the night Earth's final message echoed through the galaxy. "This is not a plea, it is a promise. You were warned." No one responded. They never did. For decades, the Galactic Coalition laughed at the primitive species on the blue planet. Earth was seen as a backwater, full of emotional creatures who warred amongst themselves, polluted their own planet, and aged faster than most known species. They were overlooked, underestimated, and eventually discarded, until humanity dared to ask for a seat at the table. They said no. They didn't just say no, they mocked. The Coalition made an example out of Earth, a mining operation accidentally drilled into the Earth's core from its moon outpost, destabilizing Earth's magnetic field. Millions died. Crops failed. The planet spiraled into weather disasters. The galactic media spun it as unfortunate coincidence. But Earth knew better. The Council of Humanity, once fragmented by countries and races, united in its pain. Governments merged, and ideologies broke down under the single banner. Never again. A new generation was raised not on dreams of peace, but on memories of betrayal. Their science advanced rapidly, fueled by rage, built on revenge. The solar system became a crucible of war tech. Jupiter's moons turned into shipyards. Saturn's rings, once admired for beauty, became camouflage for stealth fleets. Venus, the deadly planet, was now a prison for traitors. And then came Project End for Me. Even now, standing in the CIC, Command and Integration Core, of the flagship Nemesis Rising, Admiral Reyna Holloway could feel her pulse ticking with vengeance. She watched as Earth's fleet prepared in silence just beyond Pluto's orbit. She had lost her daughter in the flood that swallowed New Zealand, lost her brother in the riots that followed the food shortages. But it wasn't the loss that hardened her. It was the mockery, the way alien diplomats smirked at human emotion. So passionate, so irrational. They never realized that irrationality is what makes humans dangerous, what makes them win. Commander Jericho, standing by her side, whispered without turning his head. "All ships in position, waiting on your word." Reyna stared at the hologram hovering above them. It displayed the capital planet of the Galactic Coalition, Zirianth, the heart of the oppressors, the seat of their arrogance. Years ago, a lone alien scientist defected and brought them the truth. The accident on the moon base was no accident. Humanity had been deemed a destabilizing force and was marked for extinction in secret votes. The Council voted 14-2. Two species opposed it, the same species whose homeworlds were mysteriously destroyed in cosmic anomalies shortly after. So now, Earth brought the anomaly to them. "We're not just sending a message," Reyna finally said, voice cold. "We're ending the conversation." A soft hum spread through the ship. Then a pulse. Across the solar system, hundreds of vessels, shaped like blades and shadows, came alive. Their FTL drives synced, technology stolen and reverse-engineered from dozens of alien ships that crashed or were captured. One by one, ships disappeared into streaks of light. The Coalition would see them coming, but not understand them, not until it was far too late. In a far chamber of the Nemesis Rising, a young cadet watched the countdown. He had never seen Earth before. He was born on a station orbiting Mars. But he had heard enough. His mother died during the plagues that spread after the biospheres collapsed. His father built the reactors that now powered their war engines. "Are we the bad guys?" he asked his sergeant, barely above a whisper. The sergeant, a weathered man with synthetic arms and a steel eye, didn't look at him. "They had their chance to do the right thing. They spat on it. So now they'll choke on ours." The cadet nodded slowly, unsure if that was comforting or terrifying. In the depths of space, heading toward Zirianth, Earth's vengeance moved like a storm of steel and fury. They ignored the warning. Now, humanity brought the endgame. The Coalition's high chamber was a spectacle of arrogance. Marble-like floors shimmered beneath floating delegates, their forms alien and grotesquely elegant. Feathers, scales, crystalline limbs, and pheromone trails filled the air like some holy court of untouchable gods. At the center, the High Arbiter, a towering being of biosilicon and liquid nerves, observed the growing reports with unreadable calm. "Unscheduled warp activity from Sector 229-Beta," the voice of a lower-ranked translator droned. "Multiple vessels of Terran origin detected moving toward Zirianth system." A ripple of amusement buzzed through the chamber. "The humans again?" chuckled a tall, gas-like entity encased in a containment shell. "What will they do this time? Bark at our gates and demand justice?" Another delegate, its form entirely constructed of organic vines that responded to light, curled into itself like a flower. "Let them come. Their last attempt barely singed one of our outposts. These creatures operate on emotion, not strategy." Only one among them didn't laugh. The Zarnaxian representative, an ancient race known for memory-based survival, did not even shift in his skeletal shell. His compound eyes flickered with memory, of Earth's rage, of what remained of the two other council members who voted to protect them. The High Arbiter raised a hand of shifting metal, and silence fell. "Humanity has made their position clear. They seek retribution. It is predictable. What is not predictable, however, is the scale of their current movements." He motioned to a projection above them. Dozens of Terran vessels jumping through multiple systems, ignoring trade routes, skipping between minor wormholes. They were scattering deliberately, or creating confusion. "Send out a Class 4 intercept fleet," the Arbiter commanded. "Let us show them once again the might of the Coalition." Yet somewhere deep in the old I networks of the Coalition's communication grid, a corrupted pulse echoed. It was buried inside old code, written in a forgotten dialect, a gift left by Earth's last envoy decades ago. The signal read, "Let them gather. We'll burn them all at once." Back aboard the Nemesis Rising, Admiral Holloway observed the real-time results of Earth's tactical dispersal. Dozens of human ships jumped into Coalition-controlled systems, not to attack, but to distract, to overload the response grid, to scatter attention. Each jump was intentional, each move choreographed, and each sacrifice calculated. 2 cruisers were lost already, one ambushed near Olivan Prime, another torn apart by orbiting defense platforms. No survivors. But Holloway didn't flinch. This wasn't a rescue mission. This wasn't diplomacy. This was the last lesson. "Admiral," Jericho said, pointing at the central console. "The Harbinger-class carriers are holding formation near the asteroid veil. Cloaking is holding." "Good," she replied. "When we breach the Zirianth perimeter, the cloak will drop. By then it won't matter." Beneath her cold tone was a fire that hadn't gone out since the night she buried her family in soil that refused to grow anything again. Vengeance wasn't just a fuel. It was a blueprint. The bridge crew worked like ghosts, efficient, quiet, focused. These weren't soldiers trained for honor or medals. These were the children of extinction. Each one had lost someone. Each one was here for blood. "Open the Vox," Holloway ordered. A comms officer nodded, and the fleet-wide broadcast link lit up. "This is Admiral Holloway," she said, voice steady. "In approximately 90 standard minutes, we will break through the final perimeter to Zirianth. Some of you won't make it past that line. Some of you already knew you wouldn't when you signed up." She paused. "They call us irrational, emotional, uncivilized. They call us primitive. But they forgot something important. Our species climbed out of mud, survived ice ages, nuked ourselves, rebuilt from ash, and then reached for the stars anyway. We didn't do it because we were smart. We did it because we refused to die. She stepped forward, her eyes flicking to the faces watching her on hundreds of other ships. We are not asking for peace. We are not looking for negotiations. We gave them our olive branch, and they burned it. Now we give them fire. This is not just a strike. It's not just a war. It's the reckoning. She cut the line. And for a moment, the void between the stars held its breath. The Coalition's response was swift, but sloppy. They launched 3 fleets to defend Zirianth's perimeter, believing the human assault would be head-on, direct. But Earth had never fought like the others. In the shadow of a dying dwarf star, 20 human stealth frigates powered down their drives and waited. Coated in magneto-ceramic layers, their hulls absorbed light. Coalition patrols passed right by them. Then, synchronized to the millisecond, they activated and attacked. Their payload wasn't bombs or plasma fire. It was code. Viruses built from human language, the oldest weapon in the human arsenal, manipulation. The first to fall was the planetary defense net. Within seconds, orbital guns spun out of control. Some turned inward, others simply shut down. Confusion followed as human ships tore through the system's edge, not as an invading fleet, but as ghosts in the dark. Coalition vessels fell before they even identified the source of damage. Then came the visual feeds. From across the sector, different Coalition command centers began intercepting human transmissions. Screams, explosions, laughter. Not all of it was live. It wasn't meant to be. Earth had discovered the weakness of many Coalition species. Emotional dissonance. They weren't irrational. They relied on control, on stability. So Earth made them feel. They made them panic. By the time the first human dreadnought broke cloak and unleashed a beam weapon designed to melt through kilometer-thick armor, the Coalition's front line had already fractured. Admiral Holloway stood on the bridge, hands behind her back, as the Nemesis Rising powered toward Zirianth itself. They had 27 minutes before reaching high orbit. A message pinged on her console. A Coalition vessel broadcasting surrender. She didn't open it. "Admiral?" Jericho asked, uncertain. "We're receiving more flags of surrender. Civilian sectors are trying to open dialogue." "Are they the ones who voted to kill Earth?" "Number but. Then they can watch," she said. "Just like we watched our skies fall in fire. Just like we begged and heard only silence." Jericho didn't press further. Down in the drop bays, thousands of human Marines readied their gear. Some would land, some wouldn't. None hesitated. One soldier, a young woman named Thalia, kissed the corner of her dog tag, a small piece of her mother's wedding ring embedded in it. Her eyes burned as the countdown ticked toward deployment. They weren't coming to occupy. They were coming to erase. On Zirianth, panic finally broke the chambers of power. The High Arbiter called for emergency protocols. Orders were shouted in a dozen languages. AI failsafes began rewriting defense algorithms. The capital was activating planet-wide shielding and mobilizing ground troops. But it was too late. A blue streak burst through the sky. Nemesis Rising had arrived. And with it came everything Earth had prepared for 20 long years. From above, thousands of rods, kinetic, steel-tipped, untraceable, plunged into the city below. No explosives, just physics. The rods fell with the fury of extinction-level meteors. Entire buildings vanished. Districts collapsed. The Coalition had built its power on intimidation, on showing dominance without ever firing first. Humanity didn't ask permission. As the city erupted in fire and screams, Admiral Holloway watched from orbit, silent. This was for the waters that boiled in her daughter's blood. for the crops that turned to ash, for the children born in underground cities because the sky was poison. And as the first Terran ground forces began landing, planting the flag of Earth in soil they were never meant to touch, one final signal pulsed through the void. Endgame phase initiated. Smoke filled the golden skies of Zirianth, once considered the jewel of the Coalition, a marvel of xenotech and peaceful coexistence. It now lay fractured, burning, bleeding. Screams rang out between crumbling towers, and the ground shook under the weight of orbital strikes that fell like divine punishment. Human dropships pierced the cloud line like metal fangs, their descent controlled and merciless. Engines roared. Troop carriers opened mid-air, ejecting pods of soldiers in full-body exo-armors, gliding to the ground like locusts in formation. Sergeant Dax Morgan hit the soil first. Dust flared up around him, but the reinforced shock gel in his boots absorbed the impact. Around him, other Terran Marines touched down and fanned out. Their helmets glowed with HUD data, enemy positions, chemical readings, terrain mapping. It was all lit red. Target-rich environment. "Team 6, on me!" Dax barked through the comms. His boots crunched over the fine crystal grass of the Zirianth Gardens, an alien paradise now blackened and shredded by artillery fire. Somewhere to his left, a Coalition vehicle turned a corner, unaware. Dax raised his Gauss rifle and fired once. The burst cracked the air, and the transport exploded mid-motion, flinging its insectoid pilot through the air. No hesitation. No mercy. Behind him, Private Thalia took a knee and scanned the ruins ahead. A group of fleeing civilians, a mixture of Galoriths and Klizari, unarmed and shrieking, darted across the plaza. "Orders, sir?" she asked, eyes twitching behind her visor. Dax didn't blink. They watched Earth drown in its own oceans and said nothing. No quarter. Thalia's rifle didn't lower, but her finger froze above the trigger. "Yes, sir." But she didn't fire. Dax noticed, filed it away. He led his team deeper into the city core. Their objective: detonate the signal disruptor atop the Coalition's Unity Spire, a building that once broadcast peace treaties across the galaxy. Now, it would send the message that peace was officially dead. As they advanced, holograms of the High Arbiter flickered across shattered billboards. A pre-recorded message looped desperately in all major languages. "This is a diplomatic zone. Ceasefire is possible. Civilians should not be harmed. Please." It was cut short by another kinetic strike. The building housing the message disintegrated in an instant, flames roaring upward. Dax and his squad ducked behind rubble, though the force barely touched their shields. Thalia's heart pounded. She'd trained her whole life for this, memorized the atrocities committed against her planet. But now, standing on the enemy's world, looking into the terrified faces of children hiding in alleyways, she didn't feel victorious. She felt haunted. "Keep moving!" Dax barked. "Mission first!" Above them, aboard the Nemesis Rising, Admiral Holloway watched her fleets paint the skies with fire. Ship after ship emerged from behind the asteroid veil and plunged into the planet's upper atmosphere, releasing payloads of weaponized nanites that swarmed the defensive drones of the Coalition. The nanites had one directive: consume all synthetic defense systems. Within minutes, entire fleets of automated guardians malfunctioned, turned on each other, or simply fell from the sky like meteorites. Coalition ground forces fought back, but they were scattered, disorganized, unprepared. Their training hadn't prepared them for chaos, and Earth had become the master of chaos. Commander Jericho turned to Holloway. "We've taken control of 3 key comm towers. The 4th is still held by the Draxian Guard, heavily shielded." Holloway nodded. "Let them think they're safe. They'll hold their position. They always do." She tapped a command into her panel. Across the fleet, a signal went out. At the edge of Zirianth's atmosphere, cloaked barges opened their hulls, and began dumping crates. To the Coalition, they looked like discarded cargo, until the crates opened mid-air and screamed. Biomechanical war beasts, bred in the toxic jungles of post-collapse Brazil, engineered with alien DNA and enhanced with human cybernetics, fell from orbit. Designed to sow terror, they landed hard and began ripping through enemy lines with no concern for friend or foe. Some of them weren't even controlled, just programmed for rage. The Coalition had once called Earth's use of animals in warfare barbaric. Now they called it unstoppable. Inside the Unity Spire, the Draxian Guard fortified their positions. Towering creatures covered in silver exoskeletons and bearing plasma lances, they were considered elite, unbreakable. They had fought wars that spanned centuries. Then humanity brought minutes. A breach charge detonated the main gate, and Dax Morgan's squad stormed inside. Close quarters, screaming corridors. The Marines moved like liquid steel. 2 Draxians fell before they could turn. A third stabbed through Corporal Gaines's thigh, but Thalia gunned it down before it could twist the blade. They fought floor by floor, blood splashing walls, human and alien alike. Thalia's hands shook as she reloaded. A young Draxian soldier had tried to surrender, barely older than her. She hesitated. Dax shot him in the head without a word. "This isn't mercy," he growled. "This is justice with a trigger." She wanted to scream at him, but she didn't. They reached the signal room and planted the detonation charges. Dax keyed in the timer. 10 minutes, he said. Let's give the galaxy one last thing to watch before this building collapses. As they prepared to retreat, Thalia glanced out the window. Across the burning skyline, where human banners now flew from half the surviving towers, a world once thought untouchable was falling in less than a day. Meanwhile, the High Arbiter stood surrounded by what remained of the Coalition's leadership. Panic crackled in the chamber. Dignitaries begged for escape. Shuttles were being shot down. Command centers lost contact with their fleets. He did not move. "This is not defeat," he whispered. "It is consequence." They had voted to destroy Earth. They believed a world as young, violent, and emotional as humanity could not be allowed to spread beyond its system. They feared what humans might become. And in doing so, they created exactly what they feared. "Perhaps," he muttered, "the mistake was in underestimating how far hatred can evolve." On the Nemesis Rising, the fleet's AI began processing the Coalition's final transmissions, surrender offers, desperate calls, a few calls for unity. Admiral Holloway closed the comms manually. "You think they'll change now?" Jericho asked. "No," she replied, "but their children might, if they live long enough to remember what happened here." He looked at her, voice lower. "And if our children become the monsters they always claimed we were?" Holloway didn't answer. Instead, she watched as the signal from the Unity Spire flared across the system, a broadcast of Earth's flag burning bright on the Capitol's highest building. It lasted 15 seconds before the explosives brought the spire down. 15 seconds was long enough. Elsewhere on Zirianth, chaos had become routine. Thalia stumbled through smoke, ears ringing. Half her squad was gone. Dax had been injured, his arm blown off, but he kept fighting, holding the line with one arm and a flamethrower strapped to his back. They had completed the mission. The spire was rubble, the network down. But something in Thalia had cracked. She found herself in a quiet alley, crouched beside a dying Coalition medic, an avian creature clutching its chest, eyes wide in terror. It didn't beg, it didn't fight, it just looked at her like she was the alien. Thalia lowered her weapon. "You didn't choose this," she whispered. The medic coughed once, blood speckling its feathers. "You burned the sky." Thalia looked up. The clouds were still red with fire. "Yeah," she said. "We did." Back on the bridge of Nemesis Rising, Holloway stood before her officers. "The capital is ours. Their fleets are shattered. Their command structure is finished. From this moment forward, Earth speaks for itself. And anyone who lifts a weapon against us should know. We will answer." The room was silent. No cheers, just understanding. The war wasn't over, but the message had been sent. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy was afraid, not of monsters in the dark, but of the ones who used to beg for peace. The skies over Zirianth had gone quiet. The initial thunder of war, the relentless barrage of kinetic strikes, sonic booms, and plasma detonations had all given way to a kind of choking silence. Not peace. No, nothing about this resembled peace. It was the silence of exhaustion, of ruin, of a world brought to its knees by a fury it had once mocked. Admiral Raina Holloway stood before the large viewing panel on the Nemesis Rising, watching the planet below slowly rotate, now scarred and speckled with firestorms and clouds of ash. Whole cities had vanished. Monuments that had stood for thousands of years were now blackened husks. The seat of galactic power had fallen in a matter of hours, and the void left in its wake was darker than space itself. And yet Holloway's heart felt heavier than ever. "Transmission from Terra Command, ma'am," said the comms officer. "Put it through." A moment later, the hologram of Supreme Director Kayla Monroe flickered into view. She looked composed, but behind her synthetic eyes there was a weariness that matched Raina's. "Report," Monroe said flatly. "Zirianth is neutralized. Coalition leadership has scattered or surrendered. Resistance is minimal. Civilian losses are significant. Collateral damage was authorized." "I know," Raina replied, folding her arms. "Doesn't make it easier." Monroe didn't flinch. "Do you regret it?" Raina thought about that. The image of her daughter's charred school still haunted her. The feel of her brother's ashes in her hands after the funeral on a cloudless Martian morning. The sound of coalition delegates laughing when humanity begged for help. "No," she said, "but I don't celebrate it either." Monroe gave a single nod. "We move to Phase 3. Secure the outer colonies. Send envoys to the surviving neutral species. Offer them a choice. Join us or prepare to defend themselves." "Understood." The call ended. Commander Jericho stepped beside her, glancing at the screen. "So that's it? We're the new empire now?" "We're the hammer that crushed the old one," Raina replied. "What comes after is someone else's nightmare." Down on the surface, the fires still burned. But amid the rubble, a strange kind of order was emerging. Human troops began coordinating relief efforts, not out of mercy, but practicality. Earth didn't want another insurgency. They'd learned from history, even if the coalition never had. Sergeant Dax Morgan, now patched up with a temporary cyber arm, led a unit through what used to be Zirianth's cultural district. Statues lay toppled, alien paintings reduced to ash. Museums filled with millennia of galactic history now stood silent and empty, looted by panicked elites who fled the moment they heard Earth's fleet enter the system. Private Thalia walked behind him, weapon holstered, gaze low. They passed a group of coalition civilians, thin, trembling figures with makeshift signs that read in broken English, "We did not vote to kill Earth. We are not our leaders." Some of the younger soldiers muttered slurs under their breath. A few pointed weapons, half joking. Dax didn't stop them. He didn't say anything at all. But Thalia stepped forward. "They're not armed," she said, voice firm. "And?" sneered a corporal beside her. "You think they would have spared us?" "I don't care what they would have done. I care what we become." The corporal spat on the ground. You're in the wrong war, Princess. Dax finally turned. Let her be. That was the most mercy he would show. Elsewhere, deep in the subterranean vaults of Zirianth, a different scene unfolded. A coalition child, barely the height of a Terran preteen, hid among shattered databanks. His name was Kellis, son of a mid-ranking Zirianthian scientist who had stayed behind to delay the invaders and paid with her life. Now Kellis sat shivering beside her body, watching shadows pass over the vents above. His species had never known real war, not like humans. His ancestors were engineers, not fighters. But he understood enough. They had poked a sleeping god, and now that God had broken free, he didn't cry. He just stared at the blinking red light of a recording module still embedded in the wall. It had captured everything. The strikes, the fire, the human's final message. This is not conquest. This is closure, he whispered to himself, a promise in his language. We will not forget. On board the Nemesis Rising, Admiral Holloway sat alone in her quarters. The noise of the bridge, the chatter of officers, even the silent efficiency of AI routines. All of it faded when she stepped into this room. Just the dark. Just her and the old picture on the wall. Her daughter, age 7, laughing in a sunflower field on the Oregon Ark Farms before the droughts turned it all to sand. Holloway stared at that photo every night. She kept asking herself the same question. Did they deserve this? All of them? She wanted the answer to be yes. She needed it to be yes. But the answer wouldn't come. All she had were memories of screams from both Earth and now Zirianth. The universe didn't reward morality. It rewarded finality. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Jericho stepped in, carrying a datapad. We've received word, he said. One of the last coalition outposts surrendered, voluntarily. No resistance. Holloway took the pad, scanned it. Why? They claimed they sympathized with Earth all along, secretly, said they feared speaking out. Reyna handed the pad back. Fear is a good teacher. It's time the galaxy sat in the classroom. Jericho paused. What happens when we're the ones they fear? She looked at him. That's the point. In the days that followed, human fleets expanded outward, not with invasions, but with presence. Silent. Watching. Orbiting key systems where once the coalition ruled unopposed. The message was clear. Earth doesn't ask twice. Delegates from lesser species came groveling. Some offered gifts. Others offered technology, territory, access. Humanity took it all. And for the first time in the known galaxy, the most feared words weren't in coalition dialect or ancient Zarnaxian runes. They were in English. Terran authority incoming. Thalia stood at the edge of a ruined garden, helmet tucked under her arm. The sun above Zirianth still shone a soft, artificial gold, but now the sky was tainted by smoke. A child sat on a stone near her, a coalition orphan, thin, silent, watching her. She crouched. What's your name? She asked gently. The child said nothing. But after a moment, he pointed to his chest and whispered, Kellis. Thalia nodded. I'm Thalia. He didn't respond. She didn't press. They sat in silence for a while. Then he pointed to the sky. Will you leave? Thalia followed his gaze. The Earth fleet still hovered, like vultures made of metal and flame. I don't know, she admitted. Kellis looked at her with a question behind his eyes. Will you come back? Will you destroy more? Will you let us heal? But he didn't ask. And she didn't answer. Some things didn't need words. Back on Earth, broadcasts lit up with images from Zirianth. Glorious victories, the collapse of the spire, the moment a human flag waved on the coalition capital. The people cheered, families cried, children chanted Holloway's name in schools built on ruins. But somewhere deep in the noise, an old soldier turned off the feed. A veteran of the lunar wars. He poured himself a drink and whispered to no one in particular. "They'll cheer for her now, until they see what we've become." Outside his window, the sky was clear, but it never looked the same again. The Terran flag still waved high above the scorched skyline of Zirianth, but the fires were starting to cool. The war machines slowed, soldiers stopped shouting, and the long, uneasy silence of occupation settled in. Humanity had won. It was no longer a matter of debate. It was fact. The Coalition's heart had been pierced, and now the galaxy held its breath. But beneath the surface, in forgotten tunnels and broken districts, something else was waking up. Resentment. It came slowly at first. Graffiti in obscure dialects on ruined walls. Never forgive. We watched Earth burn, and now we burn. But who heals? Terror born from terror is still terror. Whispers, then meetings, then plans. They weren't soldiers, not anymore. They were survivors, and they weren't going to wait for Earth to decide who lived or died next. Admiral Holloway knew this part would come. War was simple, black and white. Shoot or be shot. But what came after? The occupation? The politics? The lies? That was where things got gray. The Nemesis Rising hovered in high orbit, acting as Earth's temporary authority vessel over the former Coalition capital. Thousands of human personnel rotated through its decks daily. Officers, AI analysts, cultural specialists, intelligence units. And yet with all that, Reyna couldn't sleep. Jericho entered her quarters again, late, carrying a new report. He looked grim. She didn't ask. She just extended her hand. He placed the tablet in it. She read, "Explosion in Zone 6. 43 Terran peacekeepers dead. Civilian collaborators executed by unknown insurgent cell, calling themselves the Remembrance." Reyna let out a slow breath. "Did we expect anything less?" Jericho asked. "They're doing what we would have done," she replied, voice low. "What do we do?" "The same thing the Coalition did to us," she said without emotion, "but more efficiently." He didn't flinch at her tone. He'd been beside her too long. "I'll give the order," he said. But as he turned, she added quietly, "Make it surgical." Brutality without precision makes martyrs. Jericho nodded once. And left. In the ruins below, Thalia had been reassigned to civilian control and mediation, an ironic title for what was, in truth, population containment. She hated it. Her job was no longer shooting enemies. It was separating families, pulling people out of homes, checking ID bands, scanning for known affiliations. Most days, she didn't even carry a rifle. But today, she did. Zone 6 had gone quiet. Too quiet. Word had spread about the bombing. Tensions were at a breaking point. Her boots crunched over ash and glass. The sky was gray. Artificial drones buzzed overhead, scanning walls for heat signatures. "Eyes up," her partner muttered. Sergeant Lasher, a man whose smile hadn't been seen since deployment. "They're watching. They always watch right before they strike." Thalia's pulse quickened. "Do we have intel?" "Only rumors. Some of these streets are death traps. Their kids run messages. Their elders hide bombs. Even the animals are trained." She didn't want to believe it. But she remembered the eyes of that child, Kellis. The look of knowing, of something deeper than fear. That wasn't the look of someone beaten. That was someone waiting. And Kellis was waiting. In the underground ruins of a former data nexus, he sat cross-legged with a group of others. Barely teens, most of them. Children left behind. Orphans of Earth's vengeance. But they weren't broken. They were angry. Taught by the old ones, by the engineers, by the surviving rogue AI that once ran the Coalition's security sectors, and now whispered secrets in low binary hums. In the center of the group, an older boy, a scarred youth named Vren, showed them a schematic on a cracked data pad. "This is where we plant the next one. A pressure plate disguised under the trash. Human patrols use this route every hour." "What if they shoot us?" a girl asked. "They shoot us anyway." Kalis stayed silent. He never spoke unless it mattered. And when he finally did, everyone listened. "Don't kill civilians," he said. "Only the ones with weapons." Vren scowled. "You want to win or make friends?" Kalis met his gaze. "I want them to stop killing us. That starts with showing the difference between us and them." Vren rolled his eyes but didn't argue. He respected Kalis, even if he didn't understand him, and when they deployed the bomb hours later, it worked. A Terran scout vehicle exploded. No civilians nearby, no collateral, a message, not just a strike. The Remembrance was learning, and fast. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other species watched Earth's rise with a mix of awe and dread. On the shadowed world of Zarnath Prime, the surviving council members held a secret meeting. "The humans will not stop," said Vorexil, a gelatinous being with telepathic reach. "They now rule the most powerful system, and they show no sign of restraint." "They claim retaliation," argued another. "A justified purge." "A purge doesn't set up administration. This is empire building." The room darkened as a projection played, images of Terran fleets moving into unclaimed sectors, protecting trading routes, supervising formerly neutral research stations. "They don't want justice," Vorexil whispered. "They want control." "What do we do?" The silence that followed was heavy. "Survive, hide, and wait. The cycle always turns. Even gods bleed eventually." Back in the human command center on Zirianth, Admiral Holloway stood before a map of the galaxy, red dots spreading like ink. Each one a location under Terran authority. Some willingly submitted. Others were still being persuaded. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She just whispered to herself like a ritual. They ignored the warning. A pause. Now they understand the cost. Jericho entered, another report in hand. He looked tired. "They're broadcasting again," he said. "The Remembrance, propaganda videos, children reciting poems about Earth's cruelty, footage of destroyed temples, dead parents, starving babies." "Let them," Holloway replied. "We warned the galaxy what would happen. They thought we wouldn't follow through." He stepped closer. "What if this breeds more resistance?" She turned to him, voice like steel. "Then we burn more cities." He hesitated. "And after that?" She didn't answer, because even she wasn't sure. At night, Thalia found herself walking alone, helmet off, rifle slung but silent. She passed a mural, freshly painted by a coalition artist, hidden in a side alley. It showed a child standing before a wall of flames. Behind him, shadows of humans with burning eyes. Above, the words written in a dozen languages. "Revenge is never the end. Only the excuse." She stared at it for a long time. Did they think Earth wanted this? Number Earth was forced into this. But even as she thought it, it sounded less convincing. She turned away before anyone saw her hesitate. And below, in the dark, Kalis drew his own mural. On the wall of a bombed-out data vault, with stolen paint and shaking hands. It was a planet. Blue and green, wrapped in clouds. Earth. But around it were the faces of all those it had broken to survive. And beneath it, he scrawled a single sentence, barely legible in the low light. "You were once us, and one day, we'll be you." The galaxy had always been a place of systems and stars, of ancient alliances and unspoken rules, until Earth rewrote them in fire. With the coalition shattered, and its leaders scattered or dead, there was no higher authority left to challenge Terran dominance. Not openly, at least. But empires never fall with a single blow, and they never rise without rot seeping in first. From Zirianth to the outer moons of the Dalari sector, rebellion was no longer a whisper. It was a rhythm. Admiral Reyna Holloway stared at the red, pulsing lights on her holographic war map. Attacks, sabotage, disappearances, all coordinated, all subtle. Each incident by itself was minor. Together they screamed of an insurgency far more intelligent and far more organized than anything Earth had planned for. She stood at the center of the tactical room aboard the Nemesis Rising. Her face looked carved from stone, jaw clenched, shoulders squared. The officers around her stood in silence as the data poured in. 13 Terran operatives disappeared on Televon 6. A science station on Mira fell into enemy hands overnight. 3 human outposts lost power for 6 hours after simultaneous AI hijackings. "The Remembrance is evolving," Commander Jericho said grimly. "They're winning hearts," another officer added. "Even among species that once despised the Coalition, they paint us as tyrants." "They're not painting," Holloway snapped. "They're projecting. That's what people do when they lose. Rewrite the story to justify the bleeding." She paused, then stepped forward. "We underestimated their resilience. The Coalition was bloated, lazy. But these survivors, they've found something dangerous." "What?" She looked straight into Jericho's eyes. "Purpose." In the lower decks of the Nemesis Rising, an interrogation room pulsed with low white light. Behind a one-way glass, Private Thalia stood across from a prisoner, an alien female, species unknown, skin like woven light, eyes unblinking. Thalia had been ordered to observe. "Learn their methods," the handler had said. "They're the ones recruiting for the Remembrance." But something about this one was different. "You don't speak?" Thalia asked, arms crossed. The alien tilted its head slightly. Its mouth didn't move, but its voice echoed, directly into her skull. "I speak in truth. You hear what you're ready for." Thalia flinched. "What's your truth, then?" The alien didn't answer immediately. Instead, it raised a single translucent finger and drew a circle in the air. "Balance," it said. "You broke it." "We were attacked," Thalia said defensively. "We survived." "Survival without reflection becomes tyranny." Thalia swallowed hard. "Are you part of the Remembrance?" "We are all part of the Remembrance, even you. The question is, what do you choose to remember?" Thalia turned away. But the voice remained in her mind long after she left the room. Down on Zirianth's surface, beneath the burned-out spires of what used to be the Galactic Cultural Center, a new resistance cell gathered. They were a blend of species, former diplomats, ex-soldiers, children of survivors. Their leader wasn't the strongest or the oldest. It was Kellis, now nearly 15 cycles old. His face was sharper, harder, but his eyes had not dulled. If anything, they had become colder, focused. The others called him the Witness. He had seen the fall of the Coalition, had walked through fire, had felt the boot of Earth on his world, and he knew one thing. Terror didn't end terror. It only taught new ways to wield it. "We don't win with bombs alone," he told the group. "They expect violence. They're ready for it. We win with meaning, with symbols, with control of the story." He pointed to a hologram, a Terran general speaking to settlers on a recently liberated planet, promising safety. "Watch how they speak, not like liberators, like owners. The galaxy sees this." A scarred fighter grunted, "So what? We send propaganda." "We become the story," Kalis said. "Every ship they send must fear our shadow. Every child on a backwater moon must know our voice." "And when they find us?" Kalis didn't hesitate. Then they'll learn what happens when ghosts rise. Meanwhile, Earth had become a world of paradox. On one hand, celebrations still echoed in cities rebuilt from climate collapse. Children learned about the Zerianth campaign as a righteous act of final justice. Statues of Admiral Holloway were erected across the United Earth territories. Stoic, strong, unbending. But cracks had started to form. At a military academy in New Toronto, cadets debated whether the remembrance was truly evil or simply the inevitable reaction to Terran overreach. A popular underground musician released a viral track comparing Earth to the empires it used to defy. It was banned, then downloaded 1 billion times. Even on Mars, long considered loyalist territory, graffiti appeared overnight. We avenged ourselves. Now, who will avenge them? Supreme Director Kayla Monroe saw it all, and worried. She summoned Holloway via direct transmission. "We're losing control of the narrative," Monroe said, her voice clipped and cold. "We crushed them too well. Now we're cast as monsters." Holloway didn't blink. "Do you want me to pull back?" "No," Monroe said, eyes narrowing. "I want you to finish it." Holloway leaned forward. "The remembrance isn't a single group. It's an idea. You don't finish an idea with more bodies. You finish it with something louder." "Then find something louder," Monroe said, "before this galaxy forgets why they feared us." The next operation was brutal. A small moon in the Xylan belt, Tarith 4, was identified as a suspected remembrance staging area. Sparse population. Quiet. No visible resistance. Holloway authorized Operation Clean Sweep. 10 ships, no warnings, drones deployed across every settlement. Every structure was scanned, mapped, and then incinerated with low-yield tactical bursts. Estimated death toll, 8,000. No survivors. No declaration. Only silence. The footage leaked 3 days later. Not from the remembrance, but from within the Terran ranks. An anonymous whistleblower posted the raw feed across thousands of networks. Civilians running from flame, children vaporized mid-step, automated systems cheering, "Mission complete." The galaxy erupted. Even allied planets began issuing formal condemnations. Trade routes froze. Border planets refused Terran patrol ships. Earth denied responsibility. No one believed them. Thalia sat alone in the dark, the leaked footage playing on loop. She recognized one of the drones. She'd calibrated it herself. It had hovered over a family shelter. She turned off the screen and wept. Admiral Holloway watched the fallout unfold from orbit. Tarith 4's name now joined a growing list of operational anomalies Earth had no good explanation for. Jericho entered quietly, his face pale. "We've lost 3 treaties in 20 hours. Zarnath has declared neutrality. Trade with Lariak has collapsed. There are protests in 6 Terran colonies." Holloway nodded slowly. "I authorized it," she said. Jericho's jaw tightened. "Why?" "To remind them what silence gets you." Jericho stared at her. "And how many more reminders before we become the thing we swore we'd never be?" Holloway turned away. "That happened the day they made us beg." And far below, in the depths of Zerianth, a new mural appeared. Kalis stood before it, brush still wet with paint. It showed Earth, massive, powerful, glowing. But around it were ghosts, billions, eyes without bodies, faces without names. And above it, written in all known languages, "You can conquer a world, but not its memory." The seeds of doubt, once scattered in whispers and shadows, had finally taken root. On Earth itself. The homeworld that once wept beneath the Coalition's silence now found itself standing on the other side of the mirror. And for the first time since the Endgame began, the people of Earth began to ask, Not if they had one, but what they had become to do it. Protests started small. Students marching in silent columns, discharged veterans placing their medals in coffins and sending them back to the Terran Authority in protest. Then came the blackouts, coordinated strikes by AI engineers and power grid workers, shutting down sectors for hours at a time in defiance of the government's refusal to acknowledge the Tereth 4 massacre. Then, a word began to appear across Earth's megacities, spray-painted across monuments, whispered in alleys, carved into the steel of old war statues. Remembrance! Admiral Holloway had seen revolutions before, from behind a screen, from afar. This was different. This one was personal, because it wasn't the outer colonies or some forgotten alien world in rebellion. It was Earth. It was home. She sat alone in the observation bay of Nemesis Rising, watching the blue marble float in space, serene and innocent-looking from this distance. It was hard to imagine it was splintering. Jericho entered without knocking. He didn't need to anymore. "They hit the Earth-fed databanks this morning," he said, not even trying to sugarcoat it. "Exposed communication logs. Tereth 4 wasn't just authorized, it was rehearsed, months in advance." Holloway didn't blink. "We already knew that." "They didn't," Jericho replied sharply. She turned to him. "And what do you want me to say? That it was a mistake? That we were too cruel? That we forgot our humanity?" Jericho was quiet for a moment. Then, "Yes. I think I do." Silence. The kind that cuts deeper than a blade. Finally, she stood, walking past him. "Come with me," she said. They moved down into the restricted levels of the ship, deep into the belly, where weapons weren't stored, but people. Not prisoners, not soldiers, children, orphans from Zirianth, survivors from Lariak and Akonis, genetic descendants of those the Coalition once ruled over. The Terran Authority had collected them, rebranded the act as protective custody. In truth, it was containment, dressed up as charity. They lived in sterile rooms, monitored by AI nannies, never exposed to Earth culture or language, groomed, conditioned. Jericho stared through the reinforced glass at a group of them sitting around a screen showing Terran educational programming. "They look happy," he muttered. "They don't know what they lost," Holloway said softly. "Is that mercy? Or is it another war crime waiting to happen?" She didn't answer, because even she wasn't sure anymore. Back on Earth, Thalia stood in the middle of a sea of people. The protest in New Geneva had started with just a few hundred. Now, nearly 1 million filled the streets, waving signs, chanting, demanding accountability. And Thalia, decorated war hero, peacekeeper, Terran loyalist, stood with them. No weapon, no uniform, just her voice. "They told us we were saving the galaxy," she spoke into a live feed, face broadcast across 1,000 systems. "But who saves it from us?" Behind her, a massive screen played the video from Tereth 4, over and over. "We survived the silence of the Coalition," she said, "and now we silence others in return. That's not justice. That's vengeance with a flag." The crowd roared, and somewhere, hidden in the mass, Kellis watched. Now 16, taller, leaner, quieter, but more dangerous than ever. He wore no mask. He didn't need one, because Earth had already given him a face. Theirs, in the Terran High Council, chaos. Kayla Monroe slammed her fist against the console, voice cold with fury. "She was one of ours!" The footage of Thalia's speech was playing on every screen. It had been translated into 79 languages in less than an hour. Even human-friendly colonies were echoing the chant now. "Never again, not in our name." "She's a traitor," another counselor hissed. "No," Monroe said, her voice colder now. "She's a martyr in the making, and we don't need another one of those. Holloway has to deal with this." "And if she doesn't? Then she's no longer useful." The next morning, Holloway received a secure message. Terminate Thalia. Quietly. Discredit her if necessary. She stared at the order for a long time. The irony wasn't lost on her. Thalia had once been a symbol of hope, a poster child for unity. Now she was inconvenient. Now she was a target. Jericho read the message over her shoulder. "You're not going to do it," he said. She didn't answer, just sat still. But her eyes looked like someone staring at a grave they didn't remember digging. Finally she spoke. "I'm tired of killing our own." Meanwhile, in the underground chambers of Zirianth, the Remembrance Council had grown. Kalis stood at the head of the circle, reading the latest reports from Earth. "They're imploding," said Vran, arms crossed, pleased. "The protests are spreading. Their own heroes are turning." "That's not victory," Kalis said, placing the datapad down. "Then what is?" "Change. Not just revenge. We don't want to replace Earth's tyranny with our own. We want something better." Vren rolled his eyes. "You sound like them." "No," Kellis said quietly. "I sound like what they could have been." Admiral Holloway made her decision that night. She summoned a Terran broadcast channel. Official, encrypted, direct to the people. And then she told the truth. About Terith IV. About the Order. About the fear that had driven every decision since Earth first learned it was on the chopping block. "I did it," she said, her face grim, eyes haunted. "I authorized the strikes. I believed we had no other choice." She paused. "I was wrong." The silence afterward was deafening. She turned to Jericho. "I just ended my career." Jericho shook his head. "Maybe. Or maybe you just started humanity's second chance." Across the galaxy, people watched Holloway's confession in stunned silence. Some wept, some cursed, but most just sat in silence, finally seeing what lay beneath Earth's steel grip, a wound, still bleeding. Later that night, Thalia received a private message. No name, no location, just a sentence. "The stars remember who burns them, but also who tries to heal." She didn't need to ask who sent it. She just looked up at the sky, a new fire in her chest. The endgame had ended. But the reckoning was only just beginning. It began with one ship leaving orbit. Nemesis Rising, once Earth's most feared war vessel, broke formation and disengaged from the Terran command grid. Its departure was silent, unnoticed by most, just another signal in the void. But to those watching closely, to the factions forming in the shadows, it was thunder. Admiral Rayna Holloway had resigned her commission. Not with a press release. Not with a speech. She just walked away. Because after everything, after the vengeance, after the genocide, after the lies stacked on war crimes wrapped in good intentions, there was nothing left to say. She didn't believe in Earth anymore. Not like this. Earth spun slowly, a blue marble choked by debate and unrest. The protests had not stopped. They had spread. Whole cities refused orders from the Terran High Command. Colonial governors turned off communication relays. Entire military regiments laid down arms. It wasn't war. It was rejection. They didn't want to fight Earth. They just didn't want to be Earth. Thalia stood in front of a former recruitment center in New Tokyo, surrounded by hundreds of young men and women. Former soldiers, students, civilians. They didn't chant anymore. That part was over. Now they were organizing. "There's no need for a war if we can build something better," Thalia said, voice steady. "We don't need to burn the system. We just need to stop feeding it." They wore no uniforms, no ranks, just symbols, a silver circle broken at the top. The remembrance, not a movement anymore, an identity. Kellis walked beside a human boy on the moon world of Enceladus IV. one of Earth's first colonized moons outside Sol, once fiercely Terran, now neutral ground. The boy's name was Micah. He had fled Earth after his father, a decorated general, had been sentenced for leaking the Tarith 4 footage. "They'll come for us, won't they?" Micah asked, skipping a small rock across the silver sands. "Yes," Killis said, calm, "but by then we won't be hiding anymore." "Then what?" "Then we show them who we became while they were busy pretending to be gods." Micah nodded slowly. "You talk like my dad used to. Said power's not evil, but it's addictive." Kellis didn't smile, but his voice was soft. "That's why we don't hold it forever." In the halls of Earth's High Council, cracks turned to chasms. Kayla Monroe found herself staring at empty chairs, resignations, deaths, silence. She had controlled the Terran Authority through iron and fear, through victory. But now? Now the people she once led were questioning her very existence. The final blow came when an entire fleet refused to respond to her direct orders. Instead, they relayed a message from the outer colonies. "Earth no longer speaks for us." Monroe stared at the words for a long time and said nothing. Because when gods fall, there are no parades, just dust. Holloway had landed on a small, uninhabited world at the edge of known space. She lived in a repurposed mining structure, basic utilities, no AI assistance, alone for the first time in decades. She grew food, read old books, repaired what broke with her own hands, and watched the stars every night, waiting. She knew they would come eventually, one side or the other. She didn't care which. She had done what she could. When they finally came, it wasn't a fleet. It was a single transport ship. The door opened, and out stepped Thalia, her face older now, worn by fire and hope alike. She didn't salute. She just walked to Reyna and handed her something, a data pad. Inside, a charter, signed by hundreds of leaders across human and alien systems, the founding principles of the new accord, a pact, not of dominance, not of fear, but of memory. Not a government, Thalia explained. Not an empire. Then what? A reminder, she said, of what we all survived, and what we never want to become again. Reyna stared at the list of names. She saw humans, aliens, survivors, even former enemies. "This won't last," she murmured. Thalia didn't argue. "Maybe not. But it's the first thing worth trying in a long time." A long pause. Then Holloway took the pad and signed. Back on Zirianth, the murals remained, some cracked, some painted over, but one always stayed, the boy beneath the planet, watching it burn, watching it heal. Kalis returned to it one last time. He lit a candle at its base and whispered, "We did not win." But we remembered. And across the stars, in every ruined system, every battlefield, every scorched planet, the endgame was over. Not with a weapon, but with a choice. And in its place, something began, not perfect, not pure, but possible.